Hi, and welcome back to The Growth Show. What if the reason clients are leaving after a few sessions has nothing to do with their motivation or the quality of your counseling skills, and actually has everything to do with a system that you haven't built yet? Today, I'm talking with Alissa Rumsey, and she is going to completely change the way you think about client retention. So Alissa is a registered dietitian, author, and business coach, and the founder of The Liberated Clinician, where she helps dietitians and clinicians build sustainable, values-aligned private practices without burning out. With over 15 years of experience in clinical nutrition, eating disorder care, and entrepreneurship, Alissa is known for teaching simple systems, ethical marketing, and client-centered approaches that bridge clinical skill with business confidence. Alissa's approach is rooted in weight-inclusive, trauma-informed care and a deep belief that dietitians and clinicians shouldn't have to choose between integrity and income. Hallelujah to that. Through courses, workshops, and coaching, she has helped hundreds of clinicians start, grow, and streamline their private practices. She is also the author of Unapologetic Eating and the founder of Rumsey Nutrition Consulting, a private nutrition practice. So today we're getting into the systems side of client retention and what you can actually do to keep the clients that you have worked so hard to bring in and help them have better results in the meantime too. Let's get into it. Hi, welcome to the show, Alissa. I'm so glad to finally have you on.
I know. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. So fun fact for everyone listening, Alissa and I were in the same dietetics program at the University of Delaware. And I shared with you before we hit record almost 20 years ago.
So wild. So wild. How is that possible?
Yeah. I had to think about the math again. And I was like, yeah, it's been 20 years. I don't know, but we're still young, young at heart, young in our brains. It's like it just happened, but we have a lot more wisdom under our belts at this point. So that's really good. Yeah. So I'm really excited to have you on the show and talk about client retention. So that is what we're going to be covering today with you. So first off, we often think of client drop off as a motivation issue or an accountability issue, but you say that it actually can be a systems problem in your practice. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, when we think of clients stopping work together, stopping work with us, often might be like, oh, I don't have the time, or I don't have the money, or I want to try this on my own, or I'm just not ready for the accountability. And that might be what's coming through on the surface if you hear from them, right? I think a lot of us, I've had a private practice for over a decade, and oftentimes you might not even hear from them. They might just stop booking, stop showing up, right? And what I have learned over the years is that generally what is going on there, like some of that might be true. And underneath that, some of the things that might be going on, they might be feeling really overwhelmed. Like doing this work can bring up a lot of things. So their nervous system, even if they're not even able to say it, like they might just be feeling really out of balance and shut down, and then they don't come back. When we're talking about like food and diet and bodies and weights, that is very emotionally charged. And there's a lot of shame and guilt generally attached to that for folks. And so that shame and guilt can be really overwhelming and make them not want to continue. And another big one that I think happens is their stage of change. Like, where are they in the stages of change? We think about that model. Most of us as dietitians, I know for me, I was trained to really deal with people who are in the action stage, ready to make change. Now, the vast majority of people coming through our doors might present and might have parts of themselves that are in that action stage or want to be in the action stage, but really are in earlier stages of change. And so if we show up with education and behavior change, like right out of the gate, we're not allowing room and space for them to explore the ambivalence that they very likely have, right? Where part of them wants to change and part doesn't, which is so normal. That's really what's going on. And then the systems that you have or don't have in your business can either support or undermine this.
Okay. Very interesting. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Even when I think about marketing too, and we think about, okay, you're moving people along the continuum. It's similar to like those stages of change and thinking that it's so black or white and it's so concrete, but people move up and down. There's parts of themselves in different pieces. And it can be also, I'm sure, for the patient or the client, if you are only reacting to them as if they are in the action stage and they're ready to move forward, they may start feeling like they're going to let you down if suddenly they're in those other parts.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think with our systems, one of the things that often happens is that people coming to work with us have unclear expectations about both what it's going to look like and what's expected of them. So often people, whether they've worked with a dietitian or haven't worked with a dietitian, they often come in thinking like, oh, you're going to give me tips or a meal plan and sort of like 1 or 2 sessions and done. And when change isn't happening, when they're not able to make those changes, they either think it's not working and or they feel, oh, I can't do this. I let this dietitian down, this clinician down, and then they stop showing up.
Yeah.
And so I think the expectations is really where I start with all the clinicians that I work with. Okay, all the points along, you just mentioned like the marketing continuum and where people are interacting with us and our work for the first time. And from there, are the expectations super, super clear everywhere? So starting with if you have a website, on your website, if you are using social media as a marketing tool there as well, if part of your marketing is offering a discovery call during that, the initial session, even once they've booked, continuing to set expectations. And really what we're looking to do is set the expectation of that this is a process, that behavior change does not happen overnight, that it takes time, that that's not a problem with them, that that's very normal, that this is a collaborative relationship, that we're building trust, we're trying to set what realistic expectations are through all of those places. This also goes to with your intake forms. So the forms they're filling out when they do book a session with you. We were talking before, I'm rolling out a retention toolkit because this is something I see for a lot of folks. Their intake forms, most EHRs have templates, which is super, super helpful. And that means that the intake forms our clients are getting might not be built super intentionally through our frame and what we're doing. And how can we even create forms and ask questions in a way that is building trust without overwhelming the client? So I use a lot of like trauma-informed care and principles in my intake forms, right? So getting super granular here, but how can we set these expectations in a way that is being realistic of what behavior change looks like and also presenting in a way that's not completely overwhelming or causing the person to be like, oh, I can't do this. And completely shut
If you're
down,
like, it's going to be hard work. I'm here to.
Yeah. And I think that is the reality, is that it is hard work. And I absolutely have worked with people who started and were like, whoa, I'm actually not ready to confront a lot of these things. And that's a conversation that I have with them of, look, we can slow it down. One of my mentors, Fiona Sutherland, she talks about going at the pace of safety, which is very slow, which I don't know about you, but as a dietitian, I was trained to get in there and fix and take action and go quicker. And it is hard to go slow. And it is something like years in, I still am practicing, like really slowing down. And so I think that that's something like that person who might be feeling overwhelmed and feeling, oh, this is a lot, I can't do it. That's still an opportunity to like work with wherever they're at in these different parts of them that are feeling overwhelmed or feeling afraid of change. And if we're not having these conversations with them, if they don't know that that's even something that we can do, they're just going to be like, oh, I can't follow this meal plan, or I can't follow the nutrition goals they're setting. So I'm going to stop going to see this person.
As opposed to realizing that you can still actually be that person to support them in that new way, that it's like, it's not having to abort. It's actually, we're going to shift and pivot a little bit. And I'm sure that a lot of this also takes some confidence in yourself as a practitioner too, to not be feeling, because I'm sure that you deal with people, and then myself included, like feeling I failed this patient or client then because they're feeling overwhelmed, they're not getting results. And also it's, I don't want to keep taking money from them if we're not like doing the work and whatever, but it's, what's the alternative then? They stop working with you and then what?
Yeah. Yes. And this goes back to, it's such a parallel process with us as business owners and our own work in this way as with our clients, right? So this is what shows up often in sessions with the dietitians and clinicians I work with. Exactly what you said, of feeling not confident in their counseling skills, feeling like they paid me, so I need to make it worth it. These are things that we can work on. These are expectations of ourselves that come from somewhere, right? We don't just make this up. And it's really starting to think about, okay, how did I learn these things? Is this really serving me? Are these beliefs serving my clients? And really sitting with and working through those things. And I think, yes, like developing counseling skills, we just talked about, we were in school 20 years ago, right? So my counseling skills, oh my God, like far and away to where they were even a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So part of it is it takes time. It takes time. And there are also things we can do of, again, like setting these expectations. This is a really quote unquote basic thing we can do to start letting people know, hey, this is what this process can be like or might look like. Here's what to expect. Here's what we're going to do next, right? So that they are not just walking in having no sense of what is coming or expecting the one pager, the meal plan, whatever it is. Right? So the more clear that we can be through all of these different touch points, the better.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. So a lot of this is actually happening. You talk about this needs to happen before the first session because, and then it's going to make it easier if and when these things come up, they will have already been prepared. So it's not a surprise to them. It's not a surprise to you. So what should be happening for people between the inquiry, the discovery call, and that first session that maybe a lot of clinicians are missing right now in opportunities?
So I think a couple of things. I think the sort of general, more broad, and this is going to vary a little bit depending on you and your philosophy and your practice and the types of clients you work with. But looking at your whole client like path and what their journey, what they're going through, all the different touch points, are the expectations of what this looks like or what it might be like for them, are they clear throughout? Like from the beginning, like through into that first session and then into follow-up sessions. Because as you said, we can say this and put it on our website and have it in the discovery call and have them in our intake forms and talk about it in the first session. It's still going to come up, right? Because these parts of them, it's very normal to have these parts. It's, can you just tell me what to do? But I think, so really looking at, okay, is it super clear in the language in all of these different places? I also think the other thing is from a systems perspective, there are some things that can just reduce the friction. Like when we talk about retention, I think so much of it really comes to counseling skills and systems. And how can we be transparent and open and setting these expectations? And how can we like reduce friction with our systems? So for example, I see a lot of clinicians that make the person like fill out a form or email them in order to schedule a discovery call, let's say, or a first session. Now, I understand, I used to do this too, like back in the day, and I understand like that might work for some people's practice. However, it is a pretty high barrier to entry, and there is more opportunity for drop off there because then you need to email them back, they need to email you back again, right? So I generally recommend allowing people to schedule the discovery call directly on your website without needing to contact you first, because it's going to reduce your admin time. It makes the booking process more accessible for them. And you can still set the expectations. You can have a brief like intake form, right? So that if you do see that come through and you're like, oh, this isn't a fit, I don't specialize in this, right? So I do recommend scheduling discovery call, and or if you don't offer discovery calls, allowing them to schedule the initial right on your website too. Because if they're ready to commit, great. Let's get them ready to commit, right? So I think that's an example of a system where a lot of people have a lot of things going on. It's taking their time. It's not automated. And it also is creating more friction in the client process too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And so it's just little things along the way at all of those points where maybe you're giving a little bit more context around the ways that you work or the things. And I'm guessing that you can pick when you're going to release different types of information and pieces of information. That on the discovery call, there may not be things that you're going to bring up, but then, after the first session, they may be leaving that phone call and be worrying about some things. And then you can have a system that maybe gives them a little bit more at that point, or this is what to expect now that you're sitting with all of the stuff that we uncovered or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So I think there are ways to share those expectations and also provide more information in other ways. This is an example for people who do offer discovery calls, I see one of two things often happening. Either they're really overly informational, like telling all the nuts and bolts of, okay, if you work with me, here's what you get, right? Here's what this includes. And it can feel overly informational. The other thing I see is that people turn it into an assessment. And this is often because the expectation is not set for the person booking that call, what it's going to be like. But then turning it into assessment and being like, oh, and starting to go down that pathway when you don't have that relationship and rapport and container set yet, right? This is a free discovery call. This is not a place to really be getting in to that stuff. And so that can be a place of someone getting overwhelmed because the trust isn't there yet.
Yeah, for sure. And they're not really even being able to get their sales question. I think we think that we're giving value at that point because, oh, they want an assessment. But it's like they need to know if they can work with you and what are the options to work with you and what does it look like to work with you before diving into all of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I see, again, we're talking about this client journey of website, kind of inquiry forms, discovery call, as these are places that we can start to build trust and safety and collaboration with these potential clients. And so it's an opportunity for us to assess their readiness, for them to get more of a sense of assess fit, their fit for us, our fit for them. And so this really, when we're talking about client retention, I just come back to the relationship. How can we build this relationship, right? So when we're talking about this client journey, really what I like to think of that is how are we starting to build the client relationship? So relationship, rapport, trust, because when it comes to retention, that's really what is keeping people around, right? Like that they have a relationship with you, that they trust you, that if they're having these concerns of, oh, I don't know if I'm ready or I'm feeling overwhelmed, that they can say that to you. Right? Because a lot of people, as we were talking about before, have shame about that. So then they just stop showing up. And so how can we really, through our whole client journey, think about it from a sense of like building relationship? So website and how we're wording things, discovery call, inquiry forms, intake forms, like any automations of like emails they're getting, like really making it about building this collaborative relationship. And then really with your systems, like setting that up so it's going through the whole way. And so it's really clear to them, like, okay, here's what's happening. Here's what to expect on this discovery call. Here's what to expect on this initial assessment. So they're not coming in just feeling like anxious or I don't know what's happening. So what to expect. And then, okay, here's what's next. And making that really clear throughout all those touch points.
I love that. Just that overall feeling of creating trust, a safe space, building that relationship so that they can feel like no matter what's coming up for them, you're going to be there to support them. So what are some of the biggest onboarding or expectation setting mistakes that cause clients to leave maybe after a few sessions?
Yes. Okay. So there are two big ones. The first one I'll start with, because we've been talking about this, is the expectation set. So not really clearly setting expectations that behavior change is long-term. So, whether it's over-promising or not being super clear, again, throughout all those touch points, how change happens and how it's not really this like education model of like, well, if you know how much fiber is an XYZ thing, eat more fiber. Sure, maybe some people, but probably not the people that are coming to see you, right? There's other barriers getting in the way. And so really setting expectations, setting realistic expectations. And this again comes with experience too, of sharing your experience with clients who have similar challenges or struggles or goals. So for example, you might say something, whether this is, again, probably all these places on your website, during a discovery call, like every place the client is seeing, saying something of like, I generally recommend starting with, this is what I do for my clients, weekly sessions for at least a couple of months, because this really gives us a chance and time to build awareness, to start to practice some of these new skills, and really enforces this sustainable change, not just short-term insight. And this is something too, and this is again, things you can walk people through. This is why I do like discovery calls a lot because I'll ask them what they've tried in the past and they'll tell me and I'll say, how did that go? And usually it worked for a little while and not long term. So most people have had this experience of being able to change and not for the long term. And they usually have a lot of shame. Oh, this is my fault. And so I'm coming in and saying, no, like, this makes a lot of sense. And here's how my process is different. And here's how the work we do together, it is going to be a more gradual process. And I share things like many clients will notice these small shifts along the way, and they might not seem big in the moment, but over time, they really lead to this long-term change. So how can you really be clear? Okay, most people end up working with me for X amount of sessions or X amount of months, like being super clear in that way. And if people have questions about that, they'll ask you, right? I think some dietitians or clinicians think, oh, I don't want to put them off of it might be long-term. I got this really, really amazing advice from a business consultant years ago who said, your website, not only should it be clear to the people who it's for, oh, this is for me, it should also be very clear for the people that it's not for, because we are not for everyone. And that is totally okay. And the more specific you get, the more that your people are going to be like, oh, this is for me. This is landing. I get it. So how can you really set those expectations in a way that are super specific? Like I said, like I get granular. Hey, we will meet weekly, probably for at least this many sessions. And then depending on what's going on and how you're feeling, we can start to space them out. And I usually work with people for a minimum of 6 months. So really setting expectations for that long-term change.
Yeah. And I think no practitioner listening to this would ever say that they would prefer to have someone for 3 sessions and then have them not change afterwards. I don't think that doesn't make any sense. We would want them to actually get the result. And if it's going to take 6 months, we would prefer to actually help them get the result and support them along that way and make them feel clear about why we're saying it's going to take that long or what to expect that it's going to take that long so that they can actually get the result. I don't think any of us want to just take someone's money and then know that it's actually not going to make a difference.
And I think when we're talking about client retention, right, this is the framing. Yes, from a business perspective, working with people longer term and not having to find and market for as many new people, that is good for the business bottom line. And it is good for our clients. Like client retention means that they're going to have more change and longer lasting change. And so I think we have to look at it, right? Not just from the business lens, but also this is really important for our clients. This is really where the lasting change comes from.
Yeah, I love that. And so speaking then about like how we're positioning ourselves and all of that, how does the way we package and talk about our services impact how long clients stay with us?
So I think of it as 2 different ways that we can sell our services, either as one-off sessions, like an initial session and then follow-up visits, or selling packages. And there are pros and cons to both. I've done both over the years with selling session by session that maybe clients could think, oh, I just need a couple. And the pro is that there's no endpoint baked in, because with packages, again, I did packages for a long time. And I was very clear with my expectations and got clearer and clearer over time of, okay, this is a 6-month package. And at least half the people continue with me afterwards. But right, human brains, like when people would be getting close to the 6 months, they'd be like, oh, we're nearing the end. And I'm like, no.
I should be done,
I should be done. I should have been changing more. What is wrong with me? Is this not working? So like the pro of a package is, it is a way of communicating length of care and can help them see the path a little bit more and can set the container. Like I really did love of, okay, we have 6 months, like that feeling at the beginning. And the con is if it's like a 3-month or 6-month, they're going to expect to be done in that time frame versus with the one-off sessions. And again, I think both can work depending on your business model. And I now do one-off sessions. And I set expectations all over the place that this is not just like a couple of sessions, like that we're going to be meeting weekly. And this is once we're talking and I'm learning more about them of, okay, like here's what you can expect. So I think both can work. And with both of them, we want to be setting expectations about what this might look like. Like with packages, you have some of that built in but then you run up against that, oh, and we're done afterwards, which might not be the case. So really, again, I think this expectation setting that I keep saying over and over is going to be so big.
Yeah, but you've given so many examples now of what expectations mean in all of these different touch points. And like when your packages or your services are on your website, you are letting people know this is how long you should expect, or this is what you can expect from this and why it's 6 months. And even saying, if you want to, that after 6 months, still on the website, and then you can move into a maintenance mode or however you want to call things for ongoing support. And this is an intensive jumpstart. But then I love what you mentioned about the one-off services, because I've always been like team package, because I am like, oh, people, you don't want, no one's going to fix their problem in one session. But I love what you said, that you are still communicating around that on your website and when you're on calls and all of that, that it isn't a one-off session, that the expectation is not that they're going to book you for one however many dollar hour and they're going to be good. But at least you're also then giving them, again, that expectation that this doesn't mean that you now think you need to see them for 2 years weekly. You're giving them some kind of idea of, okay, this is what it could look like, and it's flexible and all of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Cause that's always, I always come in with, here's my recommendation based on what I know about you now. I'm still getting to know you, so this might change. You might have different ideas. Like, how does this sound to you? Like, it's a collaboration. And I've had people that I'm like, oh, it would be so helpful if we were meeting weekly, and they want to do bi-weekly or every other week. And I'm like, okay. And we keep checking in on that and how it's feeling for them. So it's a recommendation and it can be a conversation. I did want to say one other thing, because as you were talking, I was thinking about with session by session, one thing that often comes up that I find with dietitians is that there's this feeling, especially with the first session, of, oh, what am I going to give them? What are they going to walk away with? Like, we are so trained that the person has to walk away from a session with something. And I always say to people, I'm like, do you see a therapist? Do you walk away with like homework or something specific, like a handout every therapy session? Like, I don't.
That would be too overwhelming, quite frankly.
Exactly. So here's another mistake I see often happen is, and this comes from our place of wanting to help. It comes from, they're paying me, I want them to feel like it's worth it. We do the big like info dump, like the 15-page assessment with like meal. Again, I used to do this, right? Like hand in the air, like I did this.
Yeah.
Like with like meal and snack recommendations and like all of these things and like links to recipes and all this stuff, right? And what happens is usually like a couple of things that happen. One, they think, oh, cool, they gave me this 15-page plan. Like, I got what I need. Like, I don't need to come back. Or like what you just said, whoa, this is really overwhelming. I can't make all these changes. And then they don't come back because they feel overwhelmed. So yeah, we also need to get out of this. And this is where setting expectations, like I tell people, okay, at the end of the first session, say to them, okay, I'm going to really and I tell them this in the discovery call too, that like, this is how my process works, where I sit with the information. I say, look, we're going to talk about a lot of things. It's a 75-minute session. We talk about a lot of things. We go back to childhood. We work our way up till today. Like, it's the start of the assessment. The assessment is going to continue because I'm still getting to know you and you're getting to know me. But I say to them, I'm going to sit with this. And then when we meet again next week, I say, like, how my brain works is I think about some buckets. Okay, given what's going on, what they've brought in, what I'm noticing, like, here are some buckets of things that I think that would be really helpful for us to work on together. And I say to them, like, okay, over the next week, I just want you to notice anything else come up. We talked about a lot today. What any other like thoughts or memories, any like new awareness? And almost always when we come in the following week, they're like, oh, I thought of this thing. And like, oh, I had never connected like these two things together, because it is so powerful when they're able to do that on their own versus us pointing it out to them, right? So we do not have to hand them, look, I still use some worksheets and prompts and things like that, but only when it's like very targeted and specific and depending on the person. Because for a lot of people, it is just overwhelming and too fast and too much. So really when we're talking about like session by session, I think that can bring that up for people of like, oh, I got to give them all this stuff. And no, slow down. That's actually not what's going to be most helpful for them to make change.
Yeah. I'm like thinking right now about if you go to the gym and a personal trainer in the first session and they're like, okay, I have to show how good I am as a personal trainer and have them lift all these different weights. And then they walk out of there and they are so sore and can barely walk. They are not going to be excited to come back into that gym with you. And so it's okay. Let's start soft and kind and supportive and work up to these bigger things. But why on earth should we dive in hardcore? That's not what's needed. Although, like, to your point, that is just totally what we're taught to do a little bit and what we're conditioned to think is what people are paying us for. But it's a whole lot more than that.
Totally. And people might have part of them that are expecting that, right? They're like, oh, a dietitian. And so again, and they might also have part of them that then gets overwhelmed by it. So this is where setting expectations, if you take anything away from this conversation today, how can you be so clear in all of these different places with people about what to expect?
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Can you share an example of a clinician that you've worked with or a few of them where it turned out that they had a retention problem and they fixed it, and what actually changed for them in their business and practice?
Yeah. I mean, a couple people are coming to mind. To your point, having a sense of, there are calculators online if you Google this, but basically there are simple calculations to calculate your client retention rate over a period of time, usually like 3 months, 6 months, something like that. And that's a baseline, right? You can't really compare it to anyone else.
Yeah.
But you also probably inherently know, oh, okay, I keep having these people that show up for 2-3 sessions and then not again. And so, yeah, I've had a few people like that where people were not rebooking. And really, this is what we looked at. We went in and audited the onboarding system, the expectation setting system. If I'm a potential client of theirs, I know nothing, I literally go through, okay, what would I then believe based on your website, based on any intake forms, discovery calls, things like that? Where can friction be reduced? What can be automated? And then ensuring consistency. So anywhere the marketing is. And when people do that, like already, I think right away, I can think of a few people who have seen good results from that, like being able to not only retain the client, but also bring in clients who are more of a fit. So I think when clients are more of a fit, they're naturally going to stay with you longer, right? Because they're a fit for you, your personality, the type of work that you do. So I think that's part of it, is that it brings in people that are a fit. And then also when we're setting this expectations, people can kind of like relax into it a little bit more. And then I'm also thinking of some people who had some of the expectation settings, and really the part that they were struggling with more was what I'll call like the therapeutic container, like setting like their system of, it's sort of like not a system like we might normally think, but it's like your counseling skills operationalized in a way that you are consistently taking steps of, okay, how am I every session, every client creating a loose structure that gives space for collaboration? How am I helping to do as much as I can to create emotional safety? How am I settling my own nervous system before session so I am showing up calm and relaxed, right? Because co-regulation is happening, whether or not we know it. They are regulating against our nervous systems. So how are we really creating this container of how our clients are supported over time and the quote unquote structure of how that care is held session to session? So I'm thinking of people, we worked on things like rapport building and like really building that relationship, establishing a structure. And again, this is like a loose structure so that clients knew what to expect. Doing things as simple as like asking, how does that sound? Or asking permission before giving suggestions. Even just that, like that puts the ball back in the client's court. It gives them autonomy. Even something like that can just be sort of like, you took a deep breath when I said that, right? Because that can just feel, yeah, okay. Like, how does that sound to me? So it can shift the dynamic. I've worked with people on like pacing of sessions. We've talked about this already, of not doing the info dump, but also really like just catching ourselves when we want to like point out all these things and slow down and really not moving any faster than the person in front of us, their capacity. And so, yeah, I think when from that counseling and like therapeutic container, quote unquote, system, I've seen people then, just again, from a retention and helping people with that behavior change and helping them for longer term, absolutely has made a huge difference.
That's great. Yeah. So if someone was sitting here today and being like, oh, okay, I definitely think I have some retention problems. What are 2 systems that you would say might be the first 2 they should fix?
So I would say, first of all, audit your client journey. So audit client journey and also with that, like your client onboarding. So, and this can be helpful to have, like I said, I do this for my business coaching clients, but you could also have like a friend or a family member do this for you of, okay, you land on my website. What are you thinking or what are you expecting if you're going to sign up with me? So really auditing that process of what does a client believe or know or not know before a session begins? What might you be able to automate or streamline? And then what is not consistent throughout that process, and how are ways that you can make things more consistent and more specific and more transparent throughout that process. So that's the first thing I would do, is I would audit your client journey. Again, website, any other kind of places where people come into your funnel, into your world, social media, email list. Usually that's your website, sometimes not. If you are listed on like listservs, if you are listed on other people's websites, if you have people that refer to you, what's the language they're using? I know this can be hard, especially with physicians. I work with a lot of therapists. And again, like they have language from me and material from me. Oh, okay, this is like how Alissa works. So really how are people finding out about you? And then through that whole journey, auditing that. So that's the first thing I would say to do. The other thing would be from the counseling lens, from that like therapeutic container lens. What are you doing to set those expectations in session? What are you doing to help to create some loose structure, to create some feelings of safety and being held like in the container of your sessions and of your working relationship? What are you doing to build trust, to build rapport? So for example, and this is something that's going to be in the toolkit, which I'm really excited about. I have this, even most people that work with me in my practice, we have a discovery call, but also in that first, so I've already talked to them 90% of the time. And also when we start our initial session, I check in, I ask how they're feeling. How are you feeling showing up today? I might bring up like, oh, I know there's some forms to fill out. Just curious, like how you're feeling coming in today. This is a huge change. When I started doing that, like one thing, huge change, because people were then able, and I said it from a place of like, I'm animated right now, but I said it more from a place of like, yeah, how are you feeling? I know sometimes that can be a lot. Like, how are you feeling showing up today? And just leave that open-ended. And that gives people space to share. Often what comes up, they're feeling a little anxious. Part of them might be excited, but part of them might be a little nervous. They're not sure what to expect, right? Even though like, oh my gosh, I feel like I've communicated it, but right, they're still unsure, right? And so creating that space is so important. So that's like even just asking that one question at the beginning. And then what I also do before I dive into like health history and start asking them like a ton of questions, I say, would it be helpful or okay if I share, I was like, I know we have a discovery call. So I say something like, I know we talked about this a little bit on our call last week, but would it be helpful if I share a little bit more about me and this process and what to expect today? Usually they say yes. And then I go through, okay, so today is really about me getting to know you, you getting to know me. It's an assessment session, but this is just the start. This is going to take, it's a relationship. It's going to take a bit for us to be getting to know each other. And I give them a little bit of a sense of, okay, here's what we're going to be going through today. I say to them, I'm a little bit different than what you might think of as a dietitian in the sense that I'm going to be asking you some questions that might not seem directly related to food. And I say, I do this because that helps me get a sense of where our work fits in with the rest of your life, and because I want to get to know more about you. I also say, if I ever ask a question that you don't want to answer, just tell me. It's totally fine. You can always say, no, don't want to talk about that. I also say to them things like, if you ever want to stop working together, you can always let me know. You always have a choice in that. If you want to switch to a different clinician, I'm happy to help you Find someone if you're feeling like something isn't working. So I say all of this at the beginning, right? So trying to really create this container that's built around trust and collaboration and their autonomy so that they don't feel like trapped. And so if that like shame does come up, hopefully they can bring it to me and share that. Or if I say something that they're like, oh, didn't love that, hopefully they feel like they can bring that to me and we can repair. So that's the other thing from like systems. And then from the counseling container piece.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was like such rich advice, especially for just anyone who is starting that first counseling session and just wanting to make sure that you're setting off on the right foot. And because it definitely, even I'm thinking about like when you hire someone for the first time, it's so much easier to set the expectations up front about the relationship and how you work and how you operate and what do they like and all of that, versus some things start going sideways and then you say, okay, now let's talk about expectations, which feels very reactive and almost like you're reacting to something that happened. And I can imagine that's very much the same in a clinical setting too. And so it's just best to do it when the energy is neutral.
Exactly. Because then if something does happen, which can be the case, like what you're hoping is that they can bring it to you and then that there can be repair, which has absolutely happened with clients of mine in the past, right? And it can be really uncomfortable. I don't know about you. I do not like conflict, but I
avoid it like the plague.
Oh my God, me too. Working on that in therapy. But I mean, I have been proud both of myself and of my clients when they have brought this to me. And then it's okay. Like we've built this relationship where we can like work through this together. It's wildly uncomfortable and we can do it. And so really that's what we're trying to do here with retention. It's about, okay, how can I create the systems in my practice and create the systems through the work in the container that I'm building to really have this relationship and this trust and rapport so that people will not just stay with you for a long time for the sake of it, but so that they can really make this meaningful change in their lives.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much. This has just been such a wonderful conversation and you just shared so many great pieces of advice. So where can people, you talked about this toolkit a little bit. Can you share a little bit more about where people can go to learn more from you, about you, all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is theliberatedclinician.com. I have a free client retention workshop that goes into more detail about the strategy that we've been talking about today. That can be found at theliberatedclinician.com/retention. And then I also have on pre-sale right now, it's going to be released in June, but right now it's on pre-sale. So those of you listening before June, you can get in with the early price, but I have the client retention toolkit. And so that is really, okay, how can I take this strategy and plug and play into my practice? So some of the things I was just saying at the end, like how can I really update my intake forms, update my registration forms, update the framework of my discovery calls. So it's like my brain from the last 10 plus years of private practice ownership into something that you can actually use and put into practice like now.
Yeah, that sounds extremely valuable. This has already been so great, just learning kind of the theory and the framework behind things. But anyone who's listening who just then wants a little bit more help and Alissa to just kind of give you some of the words to use or a little bit more of that structure, it sounds like such a great resource. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here and sharing all of this with us, Alissa. And it was just such a full circle moment having you here on the podcast after us being budding dietitians together. So thank you.
I know. Thank you so much for having me. I love this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks. That's a wrap on today's episode. And if you're walking away thinking, okay, I really need to be looking at my systems and how I'm setting expectations, that was the point. Retention isn't just about what happens in the session. It starts so much earlier than that. And now you know where to look and all the different pieces that really play into it. Now, if you want to go deeper with Alissa, make sure you check out her free client retention workshop and get her new toolkit that is going to make implementing all of the strategies that she covered in today's episode so much easier because she has it all worked out for you with the toolkit. So we have the links for both of those in the show notes. Go grab them now. If this episode was helpful, I'd love it if you would share it with a fellow clinician who needs to hear this. And if you haven't already, subscribe and leave a review of the podcast. It genuinely helps other practitioners find the show. Okay, thank you so much for listening. Thanks again to Alissa, and I will see you on the next episode.